Ultimate Muscle is not the most well-remembered anime of the early aughts, but it does have its fans. In particular, it's observed as one of the more risque 4Kids productions that feature this, and a whole lot of this. Yeah, it sort of broke all the rules of what 4Kids could get away with, as it aired on the Fox Box in North America. That's why I think it's an interesting discussion piece, because I genuinely consider it one of the best gag dubs ever made. This show is unironically hilarious, and a surprising amount of the original content and context remains for this series that originally began as a manga that was published on Weekly Playboy in Japan. Yep, that sums it all up. Considering the series only had one VHS and DVD release in North America, I'll cover all 4 of those episodes and compare them to the original Japanese version. So with that, let's get looking at how 4Kids censored the English dub of Ultimate Muscle, the Kinnikuman Legacy. But first, I want to talk about general edits before getting into the respective episodes. The first general edit is that the opening and ending credits are different. This is par from the course from a typical 4Kids production, so I won't spend much time harping on it here. I will note that the English dub opening is actually not that bad. I actually like that it's a mix of narration and genuine singing, and it really ramps up the absurdity that the series contains. The second general edit is that episode titles are removed. This is normal as well for 4Kids productions. This removes about 5 to 6 seconds per episode. The third general edit is that the eye catcher is changed. To their credit, 4Kids does sometimes use a variant of the Japanese eye catcher, but the original Japanese version rotates between a couple of them. The dubs is also shorter by about 2 seconds. The fourth general edit is that character introductions lose their Japanese text. This is standard for 4Kids productions as well, as whenever a location or character is introduced with text on screen, it is replaced with nothing in the dub. Not a huge problem, but it does remove some context for certain scenes. And the fifth and largest by far general edit is that many characters lose their forehead emblems. These emblems are supposed to be clan identifiers, and 4Kids removed most of these on the cast and villains. From an observational standpoint, it seems to be that only characters that don't resemble the Roman alphabet are removed. Terry keeps his K, and Specialman Jr. keeps his S, but Meat's hiragana is removed, which reads Niku, and most other characters lose their emblems as well. This is by far the biggest consistent change, and something that would permeate throughout the series. Kid Muscle, however, keeps his kanji, and his family emblem appears on just about everything that it originally did. But this is a pretty standard change for 4Kids. It is technically text removal, it's just very selective this time around. With that, let's get looking at the actual episodes. Episode 1 has been retitled from New Shojin Legend, Montaro Appears to A Legend Reborn. The first change of the episode is that during Kid Muscle's song, the background loses all of the kanji characters. When Kid is fleeing Muscle Planet, the P24H sign is removed on the billboard, likely signaling that 24-hour parking is available in this area. Not anymore. When Kid arrives on Earth, the Japanese text emblem is removed from the stone. This is the first indicator that Kid has arrived in Japan, so its removal makes where he lands more unclear, which I'm sure was the intention. After Kid opens Meat's cryogenic pod, Kid peeing himself is censored by adding a white flash over him. The white flash is implied to be the lights from Meat's pod, so it works in the context. Get used to seeing a lot of these changes, as they're all over the dub, considering that Kid tends to wet himself whenever nervous. Kid holding up Japanese text to explain the pun is removed, as Meat inquires as to who he is. It's a 6-second cut. When Kid flashes back to his grandfather, a flashback border is added to the dub, aside from the usual emblem removal. And the last change of the episode is that when Kid is modeling a move on Adversarius, this 3-second pan of his butt to the screen is cut out of the dub. Episode 2 has been retitled From Battle to the Dead, Golden Deathmatch to Generation Next. The first change is that the dub creates its own recap. It uses a lot of the same footage as the Japanese version, but reworks it into a new context. Kid holding up cards with Japanese text is removed in the dub here as well, just like in episode 1. Only instead of cutting out the scene, it's replaced with one where Kid is not using them at all, so it lasts roughly the same amount of time. While training at the Hercules factory, the burning kicking bags have their flames recolored from red to blue. This happens in every shot that they are shown in. The scene where Kid kicks the bag and sets himself on fire is also removed, as is Terry kicking it repeatedly. With that being said, the dub does show Terry kicking it the final time before the bag breaks off and is launched at Kid Muscle, which leads into the next change, being that Kid peeing himself has the P removed in the dub. And the next shot removal, which is Terry leaving altogether. During the continued training, the peanut text on Terry's peanut bag is removed in every shot it's in. During Terry's flashback, two changes occur. First is that the text Terry's Ranch is removed from the farm header. This happens in two different shots. The second change is that the impact line of Terry's father hitting him is removed, and instead implied to have his father yell at him instead. This is done by zooming in on the footage to show Terry isolated first and the white impact line being removed. After the flashback, the Baka text is removed on the flags that Kid, while dressing as a cheerleader, is holding. This in turn causes the dub to remove a 12-second scene where Boa Conda wonders if this cheerleader likes him or not. This is followed by another shot of Kid holding up flags with Baka, which is also removed. And the final changes of the episode is that when the masked wrestler gives Terry a handkerchief that reads Terryman, the text is removed from the handkerchief. Episode 3 has been retitled from Fierce Battle Hercules Factory to Making the Cut, Part 1 of 2. The first change is that the dub removes one of the two recaps that the Japanese version has. Yes, it has two, one in the cold open and another right after the opening. As opposed to two 30-second recaps, the dub uses a 40-second one instead, cutting out 20 seconds of footage altogether. In one of the funniest and most bizarre changes I've ever seen, the scene where Kid pees himself while hanging on the rope is changed into a scene where Kid farts. The scene lasts roughly the same length of time, but the dub uses a still and adds fart effects over it, whereas the Japanese version has Kid peeing and then a rainbow appear. I absolutely love this edit and consider it a 10 out of 10 change overall. The original is very absurd and 4Kids managed to keep the absurdity by changing just a few details, so I think it works. Kid falling in the ring that is being heated is removed, as he jumps in it and is clearly burned by it. In one of the most "it had to happen" edits, one of the wrestlers has his design changed. He originally resembled the flag of the Confederate States, one of the acting agents of the US Civil War. He is instead painted entirely red, removing any American or flag connotations to his design. This happens in every shot he's in. When Kid farts, the onomatopoeia that reads poo is removed, but the scene is kept as is outside of this. During Terry's fight with Buffalo Man, his close-up hit to Terry's face is removed, and then the follow-up shot of the continuous punches are mirrored for some reason. In a rare instance, footage is added to the dub. It is recycled footage of Buffalo Man pummeling Terry with the continuous punches. And the final change of the episode is that when Buffalo Man charges at Terry, the impact is blurred so as to not look so graphic. Episode 4 has been retitled from Battle of the Century, First vs. Second, to Like Father Like Son, Part 2 of 2. The first change is that the dub removes the first recap of the Japanese version. It's a 40-second long cut. The second recap is kept largely as is. In this shot, the trophy loses its text, but it's a barely noticeable change anyway. In this scene where King Muscle deflates, the dub cuts out him turning around and showing his body mass to the crowd. It's a pretty funny scene, but it's obvious why it was removed. In the scene where Kid headbutts King Muscle, the dub adds a shatter effect to King to obscure most of the impact and make it look less graphic. And the last series of changes all revolve around this Japanese map. In the Japanese version, it's clear that the wrestlers are going to Japan. In the dub, the map of Japan is replaced with a rotating globe to make the connotation more global. The dub then cuts out two shots, one of them showing where the wrestlers will be going to in Japan, as in specifically, and another one of a specific location where a match will be held, and the very funny directions on how to get there. And that covers the first 4 episodes. As you observed, a lot of the gross humor is left largely as is, and not too much is taken out of the series. I largely believe that the most offensive aspect of this production is the removal of the character emblems on their foreheads. It's obvious why it was done, as 4Kids did not want characters with Japanese kanji on their foreheads going around wrestling. In fact, when 4Kids famously commissioned a new season from Toei, they asked Toei Animation not to draw the cast with any characters on their foreheads. That's a whole other level of petty and persistent. Other than that, you have your typical 4Kids censorship. Text removal, covering up nudity, and obscuring some of the more intense physical impacts is just something that should be expected in anything put out by 4Kids. But overall, at least in these 4 episodes, there's a lot more left in than was taken out. I hope this series gets saved by Discotex someday, as I would love to revisit the entire series when there's a complete physical release. RIP TV recordings don't do this show justice, and it's worth checking this one out, at the very least, because stuff like this was left in. Thank you guys for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe for more stuff. Thank you guys again, and as always, have a good one.